Now on, we can move to the next presentation, which is gonna shed lights on the digital digital assets. It's gonna be introduced by Mr. Sopheap Lao. If he can come to the stage, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Sure, just leave it here. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Like this?
So I'm waiting for the presentation. Oh, it's coming. Okay, good. The clicker? Sorry?
You know how to use it, yeah?
Yeah, back and forth. Right? Yeah, that's very simple. Hi, everyone. So, I'm Sopheap Lao. I'm the CEO of Davensi. We're a Web3 financial services company. Today, in this session, I'm not going to talk about the company. So we have a booth there. It's right there. You can't miss us. If you want to know more about the company, then come and meet with the team. They'll be very, very happy to answer your question as to what we're currently doing. The presentation now is really something related to what we are going to do, actually. Of course, we are trying to be a global company, but at the same time, we want to adapt to regional and cultural specificities around the globe. So, knowing that there are about 2 billion Muslims in the world, and the population is set to grow by 75% in 2050, I thought it was would be very interesting to take a look at Web3 in a perspective of Islam. And I think it's the right place for that. We're in Dubai, right? Well, the prayer time was at 12:05, so I think it's over. So I think it's really the right time to talk about Sharia-Compliance and digital assets. We're actually living in a very, very crazy world. Apart from COVID, the COVID madness. By the way, I'm just out of COVID. That's why I'm mentioning it. It's not even in the slide. But it's a really crazy world. You think of inflation. You think about the climate change and the way we destroyed the planet completely for the sake of progress. And by the way, everything has been installed with with Web 2.0. Things related to those big corporations utilizing your data for corporate use. So so you think, for example, that McDonald's is only a 3.99. What actually it costs you your health, and you think Netflix is just 17.99 per month. What actually it costs you your time. What about the social networks? You think they're free? They actually cost you your focus. Okay, so it's really crazy. And at one point, I was wondering whether we could calm this thing down, take a break a little bit, and think of a more socially sustainable society. And I was thinking, socially sustainable society means it's a conjunction between economic viability, environmental protection, and social equity. And in order to think about things to be changed, in order to achieve the socially responsible society I was presenting ideally, a very good perspective is actually to go through that analysis framework, which is called PESTEL. P for politics, economy, social, technology, environment, and legal as well. And I figure out 4 of those 6 dimensions are actually covered by Islam. Okay? So nowadays we're talking about Web3, but Web3 is more of an enabler of something. So I'd like to invite you to take a look at what we found out, like if we can correlate Islam and Web3. And we'll see if it is a good opportunity to implement, in a mainstream way, Islamic finance, as we call it. Now, we're expecting the combination of Islam and Web3 would lead to more sustainable outcome. So let's see what we found out. Well, first of all, analyzing Islam and the way it influences finance, basically, we have to understand the 4 pillars of Islamic finance. Hopefully, I can be helped with, by Muslims around. I mean, is there any Muslims around here? Okay, and you guys tell me if it makes sense, right? It does make sense for the 4 pillars there. So interest, so riba, it's really forbidden. So that's the basic principle. So, well, obviously I'm talking to the non-Muslims, so they know, okay? But you just let me know if it makes sense, huh? So that's the basic thing. Riba is forbidden. So the second thing that is really forbidden as well is when it comes to a contract or a transaction, if there's too much uncertainty in what you do, and if the parties are not equally treated in terms of risk, then it's something that is forbidden. Okay? And you will see later on, it's all about risk bearing in Islamic finance. So when there's too much uncertainty for one of the parties, or overall, if the contract is too uncertain, then that's forbidden. The third pillar is gambling. Of course, you can't do that. It's really not healthy. So there's even an Arabic word for that, is maisir. And the fourth pillar is actually, the rest of it. It's really, what is haram. It means, what is not very safe and not healthy for the society in general. A lot of things. I mean, the most famous thing we know is not to eat pork, for example, but there are other many things as well. So as soon as you have an activity that is not haram, then you're allowed to do it. But if there's anything that is related to haram activities, then, of course, that is not Sharia compliant. Now, if we put this in perspective of what is finance, what is Islamic finance today, Islamic finance can be broken down into 6 parts, per se. The first is banking. We all know what banking is, dealing with the bank, right? There's even a bank called the Islamic Bank. I think it's in Dubai, but it's everywhere in the Emirates. Now, the second thing is securities and equity, so-called sukuk. Well, actually, the first 2 categories represent approximately 95% of the volume in Islamic finance. The rest is interesting to take a look at, by the way. I mean, leasing, investment funds, and microfinance as well. There's a special mention about insurance, takaful. So we want to take a look at this clearly because obviously, basically, you will see it. Insurance is really, something that is not basically Sharia compliant, simply because of qarar, because of the excessive uncertainty. Okay, but we see how we handle it in the Islamic world. Now, we had the basic for Islamic finance. Now, I want you to take a look at what Web3 is really, down to the core. DeFi, decentralized finance, is actually a part that we're interested in, and it is a subsector of Web3. They all have in common 7 characteristics. So the first one is obviously decentralization. Well, we're talking about decentralized finance, so in a way, it's no-brainer that it's decentralization. It's actually not rocket science if you think about it, but it is. I mean, it's one of the greatest achievements in terms of technologies that we've come up with since the rise of Bitcoin. Now, the second thing is about accessibility. DeFi is actually accessible to everyone, so it's permissionless and it's open, so everyone can get into DeFi basically. The third thing is interoperability. It means that all the protocols that you would have on a network are interoperable. I mean, you can combine loans, for example, with trading, and then you get margin trading. Okay, so this is one simple combination you can do on DeFi, and like I said, it's interoperability that is very important in DeFi. The fourth thing is no less interesting and no less important. It's non-custodial. It means whatever it is, your data, your coins, your NFTs, whatever things are owned by just yourself. It's not owned by big corporations, okay? It takes a lot of responsibility, of course, because if you own your own asset, it's your token, it's your assets, it's your data. It means you shouldn't forget your password, because there are so many stories about people forgetting their password and having their coin stuck, you know, in their wallet. And see, today it's all limited to NFTs and cryptocurrencies, right? But what about the lifetime of data? I mean, think about it. That requires a lot of responsibilities. Hopefully, we're living in a world where passwords is going to be obsolete, hopefully, because now we have biometrics and everything. So I think things have a tendency to get better over time. So non-custodial, very important aspect of it. Now, the fifth characteristic is programmable. You heard about contracts, smart contracts that are programmable. Well, actually, it's even one of the key points for Islamic finance. So we can literally run audits of smart contract and tell whether it's Sharia compliant or not. All right, so we can literally cater for Muslims if we create the right contract and the right environment. The sixth characteristic is about immutability. It's immutable because it's written on the blockchain, basically. So you can't deny it. So it's something that is verifiable cryptographically. So you can't say you haven't done this. I mean, an event is recorded. Each of the events is recorded on the blockchain, and you know, and stays in the blockchain forever. And that's one point that is also interesting, because it would serve the purpose of auditing the transaction and taking a look at the activities behind the scene, if ever something is Sharia compliant or not. So auditable contract, auditable processes on a blockchain is probably something very important as well for Islamic finance. Now, the last thing is actually token-based. Token-based means you can tokenize pretty much everything. Tokenization is actually a way to prove that something exists without revealing sensitive information, okay? So you can literally tokenize your identity. You can tokenize your transaction. You can tokenize your NFTs, whatever. And that's owing to the secret of mathematics. It's called hashing. So this does all the black magic work behind. Is you can take a set of data that has potentially unlimited size, and you can actually turn it down into a couple of sequence of letters and numbers. So that's the magic. It's just like a DNA in a way. I mean, we're all very different, but we still have those four letters, you know, in our DNA, A, C, T, G, and that's it. But combined, you get very, you know, unique individuals. So the same thing goes for tokenization. Oh, I forgot the right part of it. Now, just those are examples of DeFi applications, and we want to come back to it later on when we want to verify whether those apps categories are Sharia compliant or not. Okay, so those are the four most popular application in DeFi. Okay, well, there's a problem in the layout of it due to the font, I believe. But you got it. Decentralized exchanges. We want to verify whether it's Sharia compliant. Lending, borrowing, and staking. Synthetic assets, for those who don't know, is simply the tokenization of derivatives on a blockchain. Okay. So it's something to do with the seventh characteristic we have there. And also we take a look at non-fungible assets too. And hopefully you find it interesting. Going too fast? Okay. Now, if you put Islamic finance and Web3 in perspective, both of it, I mean, they have one thing in common. is the formidable and remarkable growth over the years. Although Islamic finance has been here for centuries, it really started in the 70s, 60s, 70s, around the corner. And you would see from 2003 to what we expect from 2013, is actually a huge growth, right? 200 billion US dollars in 2003 turns into 3.8 trillion expected in 2050, in 2030, sorry. Now, just talking about Sukuk, it has bounced 20 times from 2003 to 2013. So it's really just 10 years. And actually it grew 20 times. So you can imagine further on what's coming next. And by the way, like I said in my introduction, even the population, Muslim population, is going to increase big time, in 2050. So we expect, the 2 billion Muslims today to grow up to 75% in 2050. So it's going to get more and more important to take into account Islamic finance. Taking a look at Web3, well, it's actually a nascent area, right? So we don't have numbers, of course, before 2020. It's really nascent, but you can still see that this year the market is expected to be 6.2 billion US dollars and expected to be over 80 billion US dollars in 2030. Okay, so both of them have a potential of growth that is tremendous and remarkable. Now, I was wondering whether, what if the Islamic finance, the 3.8 trillion we're talking about in 2030, what if that amount of money would flow into Web3? And that's crazy. And I don't even think that the number we've got for Web3 takes into account the possibility that, Islamic finance would get into Web3 fully. Okay? So I wonder even if the number we have here is correct or not. Just take into account the growth of Islamic finance. Now, those are some applications of Islamic finance, okay? In the middle, what you see is actually what we're currently doing. So Davensi, we do digital asset management, digital asset trading. We started as an exchange, by the way, but we're moving to fully Web3, not only considering just trading. And we also do digital assets investments as well. Now, around those three sectors we're tackling, we actually build our core tech, totally in Web3. And we want to make sure that some of our customers will get into like Sharia-compliant product as well. So like I said, we're a web company, so we want to be global, but at the same time we want to adapt ourselves to to some religious constraint, just to make sure that Web3 works for everyone. So some application of Sharia-compliance, Sharia-compliant finance, financing arrangement typically. I'm gonna go quickly through the points, but do not hesitate to ask questions. And I ask all those Muslims people here to tell me whether it makes sense or not. So, like I said, profit and loss sharing is really the basics of Islamic finance. Okay, so it's called mudaraba. So, if there's something that is wrong for one of the parties, then that's no good. Okay, declining balance and shared equity is really something very specific to Islamic finance as well. The goal is actually to share the property or the ownership of a property you buy or an asset you buy. In traditional finance in the Western countries, even if you go for a loan, you're actually the owner of the underlying asset in the first place, right? So in Islamic finance, actually the bank, the lender, will actually co-own the assets along with you. All right? So it will actually prevent anything related to riba. So if in advance we know the price of the assets eventually, and there's a prearranged agreement, between the parties, then I would be ready to pay, the asset over time and own the asset over time with, with an arranged payment scheduled over time, right? So there's no riba, but there's prearranged payment over time and a prearranged ownership gain, you see, over time as well. So that's the declining balance shared equity principle. Installment sales, so there are situations where something cannot be delivered, but at the same time you would want to pay over time, like several payments. In traditional finance, you would get interest out of it, okay? In Islamic finance, it's all about pre-arrangement, right? So it's actually in order to avoid the gharar thing, which is the uncertainty. So it's always pre-arranged in the first place. There's no uncertainty as to the outcome, as to the price, whereas on a traditional finance, interest rates can be volatile, can go wrong, etc. So this kind of uncertainty, this thing, does not exist in Islamic finance. And there are other things as well, which is allowed, leasing, Islamic forwards, those are all things, I won't go into details, but those things are no problem, Sharia compliant. Investment vehicle equities, that's part of the sukuk, that's allowed too, so that's no brainer. But because the thing is basically, that has nothing to do with riba, is actually, it's all about profit. It's not just about interest. Like we said in Islam, don't curse time, for Allah is time, right? So you can't buy something, or you can't, mention something that belongs to Allah, after all. So you don't do that. So the way we handle finance in Islamic finance is actually all related to giving a sense of certainty in anything we do. Pre-arrange when we're allowed to pre-arrange. When we can pre-arrange. So everything is pretty much prepaid. I was surprised. I settled down in Dubai like 2 months ago, and I was surprised, how many things are like prepaid, like all the time, right? So that's appreciable because there's no uncertainty, as to what's coming next. Now, I said I want to say something about insurance. Just to say that insurance basically is really forbidden, it's really haram basically, just because of the gharar thing, the uncertainty. And it's interesting the way Islamic finance handle it, because, by the way, we need insurance, all right? So the alternative is actually, what we do in Sharia compliance insurance is actually mutual fund. So you can imagine subscribers in a fund, right, putting their own money in a pool. And when something happened to one of the subscribers, then the money is just pulled out. So there is no uncertainty whatsoever. Because insurance basically is you pay for a service that maybe will not be rendered, okay? But that's pretty much different. Using the mutual cooperative insurance, that's the way Islamic finance handles the issue of insurance. Now, this is a summary of what is Sharia compliant or not. Talking about the 4 applications I was talking about earlier. You can see decentralized exchange is actually, a warning. There are a lot of risk in running decentralized exchange when it comes to Sharia compliance. There are interest, there are excessive uncertainties. It can be related to gambling as well, and it's harmful, right? Drives people crazy, basically, right? Now, coming to NFTs, you can see it's quite safe in terms of Sharia compliance. No wonder why in Dubai we have a metaverse strategy, But nevertheless, in the real world, like in a virtual world, you have to respect the 5 principles there: utility and benefit. So what is useless or just for amusement is not allowed. It's not allowed in Islam. All right, so you have to do something very useful. Just for amusement is not allowed. Real versus virtual means you can't, you can't prevent somebody to do something in the real world, even if you're in a metaverse. So obligations such as prayer time, is really something you can't prevent even in the metaverse, okay? Representations, of course, don't represent Allah or don't represent the Prophet. Obviously not the limbs, part of the body that are not allowed to be represented. Those should be respected as well. Now, experiences. Experiences means you don't go for a nightclub, even if it is virtual, right? Not nightclub, but strip club. I mean, that's even worse. Porn is forbidden as well. And fifth, and that was related to the table we saw before, with exchange, trading is actually, well, actually, in a way it's allowed, but you need to pay attention to the level of certainty you would want to bring in a transaction. Okay? So eventually, that would be my conclusion after all. Islamic finance is actually, I mean, as I'm trying to present it, it is in a way some kind of socially responsible finance because you have boundaries, okay? So boundaries, ethical and economic principles that are boundaries that are very necessary for us to create the socially responsible world. So I would suppose implementing Islamic finance in the Web3, which is not even allowed, I mean it's possible, would probably lead to something that is more sustainable and more stable. So we can show that Web3 is actually an opportunity for centuries-old practices to make even more sense in the real world. Okay? So hopefully it was interesting. Again, I'm Sopheap, I'm the CEO of Davensi, and I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much for your such actually interesting topic, which is going to talks about the Islamic finance and digital assets. And if you don't mind, we open the floor for such like maximum two questions. Okay. And then if more questions, because I felt like everybody got interested for your topic. Any more questions or any questions for anyone?
Yeah.
Hi, I'm non-Muslim. My name is Ahmed, but I work for one of the largest Islamic bank as a chief risk officer. When I look at the blockchain and NFTs and the very nature of those things being done, I think the democratization of finance in general and how assets and transparency and NFT and contracts are spelled out is naturally inclined for the Islamic assets. And thank you for, it's not more a comment than, in terms of what we talked about. I really like the fact that the whole concept of blockchain, NFTs, to some extent metaverse as well, it really lends a lot to Islamic banking, Islamic finance. Thank you for the good work you're doing. Thank you.
All right, so that wasn't a question, probably is really, yeah.
So if anybody has any questions, look, we can move aside so we can let the floor for the next
Well,
presentation.
do not hesitate to come to see us, on our booth.
Yeah.
We'd be happy to talk to you guys.
Thank you very much. One more time. Thank you. Shukran. Jazakallah khair. Thank you.